Good afternoon, and to some of you, maybe good morning or good evening. Thank you all for participating today. It will be our fourth webinar of a series of webinars focusing on the challenges in mobility. My name is Mieke Masselink. I'm the community manager of the Smart Mobility Embassy that is hosted by Connect, which is an independent network organization in mobility and logistics in the Netherlands. We tend to bring people, knowledge and expertise from different organizations and different countries together. And we focus on the international public-private dialogue with the aim of creating a greater impact on society with mobility solutions that are initiated and accelerated through collaboration. And today we are addressing the challenges around area-oriented approach for mobility, a very hot topic, at least in the Netherlands, where there's a lot of interest from cities and regions, but also a lot of questions about such an approach. Every city is facing different challenges. How do we deal with that? What does it mean for the businesses that are creating solutions? And how, for example, do we organize some coordination between different regions and cities? But luckily, we are talking to several experts that are helping us to find some of the answers on how to successfully implement an area-oriented approach that helps us achieve mobility policy integration. Here with us today, my colleague from Connect, Tom van Dam, Laurens Lapré, who is working for CGI, a worldwide IT consulting and system integration company, Han Wieringa, who works at the Rotterdam-The Hague metropolitan area, and Marijke de Roek, who's working at the city of Antwerp and is also leading a smart waste program to Antwerp. Tom, I would like to start with you. Could you please provide us some of the latest developments in the Netherlands on the so-called area-oriented approach?
Yeah, well, thank you, Mieke. Smart mobility is a part of the national-wide program in the Netherlands where new technology is tested into existing tasks to maintain the quality of mobility in the Netherlands. It involves a lot of money to pilot smart solutions from scratch, and in the recent years a lot of knowledge is developed and also tested in proof of concept. Due to the high expenses, you see also activities on international scale, like the TEN-T corridors and Intercore, and some other international projects where you see European funding helps to trial and error without the budget cuts in existing activities. And because of this broader approach, you see the goals set are more generic and must be applicable to multiple cities or countries. And we notice sometimes smaller cities had to cooperate with a national program without sensing the urge of the problem. And cities, however, are dealing with their own challenges and can spend their budget only once. So one city might be combating traffic congestion from cars, while another is struggling with the properly directing all the cyclists through their city. And we have to watch out that we are not creating problems so we can start implementing our solutions. But we also have to think about the other way around by addressing the specific problems and find a fitting solution to deal with that. But still, profitable solutions require scaling. So, tailor-made solutions are hard to find, but the challenge in one city are mostly experienced also in another city. And by sharing that information, having dialogues and conversations, we discover similarities and ways to cooperate together. So area-oriented approach can help find the sweet spot of local issues and the more generic solution.
Thank you, Tom. And what do you hope to hear from the other speakers today?
Today I hope to hear more about some experiences and also how we can learn and collaborate with each other. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. Thank you, Tom. I would like to move on to Laurens. Laurens, you are very much involved in SmartWays, which is a large, so-called area-oriented program in the south of the Netherlands. In your eyes, what is an area-oriented approach, and can you also explain why you think SmartWays is a good example of that approach?
Okay, thanks. Well, I think that the essence of an area-oriented approach is that the local agenda is paramount. So you look at the different solutions clearly from the local agenda. What are the problems the municipalities is facing? What are the problems of the region? And then you try to combine their local problems with generic solutions. Now, that is something we're doing in the SmartWays program, where we have infrastructure projects, smart mobility projects, innovations on one side, and a clear view of the local agendas on the other side. And the trick is to take these generic projects and generic services and make them fit for purpose on a local scale, making sure that the region takes ownership of those projects. And that is something I think we're doing very well in SmartWays at the moment.
And do you also feel like cities are finding each other? I mean, if one city has a challenge and is looking for a solution, maybe another city already found that solution. How do they find each other?
That actually is happening at the moment. And to give you an example, we had one region who was very much looking into how can we keep elderly active in public transport so that they can use public transport longer, make them more mobile. And that same project was run by another city a couple of years earlier. So they got together and they took over the concept. And we essentially build a number of templates so it's easier to find if other regions have done similar things. To give you an example, you can now look at another region and say, what are the projects you've been doing around the city center? Or what are you doing when it comes to leisure, recreation, or corridor management? So we try to make it easier for cities to discover that there are other cities who have probably interesting projects. And we see now a number of them being duplicated in other cities.
And do you also believe that can be across borders?
Yes, I do believe so. And there are a number of regions which have a lot to do with Belgium and Germany, for instance. And there you also see there's a national fit where they're trying to learn from each other. And of course, if you get a project working which works in the Netherlands and in Belgium and in Germany, that's of course very ideal to scale up on a national level.
Yeah. And I'm interested from like a business perspective. I can also imagine it's not the most interesting if every city wants a tailor-made solution for them to scale their solution. Do you agree, or is it interesting?
Well, I agree partly. So it is certainly true that from a business perspective, you want a global solution, which can be used in a lot of number of different cases. But the trick to get it in a region and get it in an area working is if it fits within the local agenda. Now, these agendas may differ, and different regions have different mobility problems, but they typically are willing to look at solutions which are being used in a broader context. To give you an example, let's say you're a city who wants to do something with shared mobility. You can try to find a vendor only for your city. Or you can try to find a vendor who is using that service for the whole of the Netherlands and see if you can adopt it to your city. And suddenly that business case makes a lot more sense. So I feel that cities are learning how to work with local priorities when it comes to policy, but also how to use global services fit for their location to get the scale they want and the price they want.
Yeah, that makes sense. And why do you feel like this approach that is probably also used in many other sectors is specifically for mobility so needed?
I'll give you an example. I'm now working on a project where we use energy from solar panels, which cannot be distributed back to the network, to load electric cars, which can then be driven around to get elderly to certain places. Now, if you look at that project, it's energy transition, mobility transition, and social inclusion. If you would do a project like that on the national level, The Department of Social Inclusion never talks to the Department of Energy Transition. But on the area level, on the local level, these three stakeholders are combined and probably working in the same room. And so you can get these bridges working on the local level, and once it is in place, you can scale it up. We've seen a number of projects, very interesting combinations where mobility is only part of the solution, but the whole project makes it much more interesting because it fits with the local agenda. And many mobility problems are not really mobility problems, but are just aspects of something bigger. And that is something you can get at with an area-centric approach.
Yeah, so it's way more integrated way of looking at a challenge in the city. And as an IT consultancy, CGI, you have lots of experience with data. How do you feel like, or what's the role of data in creating a success for this approach?
I think data is crucial. And as soon as you say we're looking at it from different perspectives, you are immediately working with data from different silos. So all these holistic approaches and projects need data exchanges to work and to get data from the different silos together. So there's a lot about standardization. How can we take information from trucks, make it available for public officials? How can we get roadworks information and make it available for logistic organizations? So there's a lot of data exchange going around to make it really possible. And I think that one of the things you do in an area-centric approach is you use more than one perspective, which also almost immediately means that you have to get your data from a whole series of sources. Some of those sources have never been connected to each other, but you need them anyway to make the project work.
So you also see that as one of the main challenges, to connect all the right
That's
data.
true, and then we see a number of exchanges now in the Netherlands. For instance, we are working on the data exchange facility for logistics, where a number of these different perspectives come together in a way that makes it interesting for logistic companies. And as soon as you have something like that, public organizations want access as well, because it's the idea of sharing that data, which gives you the possibility to address these problems. And it is not possible anymore to address these city problems from one single perspective alone. Yeah. They're just too complex.
Well, hearing you talk, I think that everybody is now wanting to get this area-oriented approach, but there might also be some negative consequences of such an approach.
Well, I think that the positive aspect, you do it with the local people, is the negative aspect at the same time. You have to do it with the local people. Yeah. It's essential that they take ownership of the projects, that are their own projects, that you do not step in and take the coordination away. And of course, those people have to exist. They have to be made free. They have to be trained to do this. They have to be willing to do this. So it's very important that there's local energy to address these mobility problems. And that has to happen. So what we see is that in some regions where mobility is high on the agenda, you will find these people earlier. But in other regions, you might really have to look to see if you can get a group of people on the local level who are willing to commit and work on the program.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Laurens. I would like to move on to Han. Han, you work for a metropolitan area. To what extent can, well, in your case, the metropolitan area of Rotterdam and The Hague, institute its own rules for smart and sustainable mobility?
Yeah, good afternoon, Mieke. I will try to answer your question from a view on policy making, and also give an example of a project. When we consider policy making, we have two committees in our region, which consist of 23 aldermen, and they can decide about policy. And our transport authority works on targets, and targets are about better traffic flow, fewer road deaths, fewer emissions, for example. And in order to achieve these goals, we are drawing up a package of measures, and together with municipalities and the local authorities in the region. Mm-hmm. And those local authorities, they are free to use the policy that we make. So it's up to them. But mostly it helps them to make these policies together. And in practice, we see that they use those policies we make together. And beside policy making, we can also look at project level. And for example, I worked on the Hoekse Lijn, and that's a former railway which was transformed in a subway. And this line connects Rotterdam with a few neighbor cities, and it ends at the beach. And this new line gives the possibility for policy plans to be turned into real urban plans for living, working, and recreation. And we try to work on these plans from a regional perspective, but in line with what Laurens told us, you have to do this with the local authorities and the local people. And it gives energy when you make this plan together, and you can work on it on a local level.
Yeah. And looking at the metropolitan level, what are the main challenges to find that synergy between the larger cities and the smaller municipalities to achieve that policy integration? Because I can imagine that the smaller municipalities will have less capacity or expertise than the city of Rotterdam, so, for example.
Yeah, you're right. What we see in our metropolitan region is that we share the main purpose of cooperation. We want to work on a stronger socio-economic agglomeration, including getting our transport system stronger. And where possible, we ensure that the knowledge that is shared, and so, for example, people from Rotterdam, they have a bigger group that works on transport, so we can use their knowledge and experience for the smaller cities. And for example, we organize knowledge sessions about sustainable mobility or smart traffic lights or road safety. And from our organization, we have a group of people that organize this knowledge sessions, and we also try to advise the smaller cities when they ask for it on projects that they work on. So, for example, the Hoekse Lijn again. I started this project with the 4 cities and the province to start to get a vision on what we want for area development around this new subway, and this gave the energy to work further on the local projects.
Yeah, but and do you also feel like there is enough exchange between other regions? I can imagine you told us within the metropolitan area it already happens, that, and Laurens also said that you exchange what project is happening where, so you can learn from each other. But do you also feel like, well, for example, Amsterdam or Antwerp is also, you're also exchanging with them? Are they also knocking on your door? Are you also sharing your experience with them? How does that work in practice?
Yeah, if you look at our region, we're really close to the other regions like Amsterdam, Utrecht, Brabant, Eindhoven, and also Antwerp. Within half an hour, you can reach almost all the regions that I mentioned. And I think that the people know each other in these regions. For example, for smart mobility, we work together, and we work also with other European regions. And for urbanization and mobility, we have the same approach with Amsterdam, trying to lobby with the national government.
Yeah.
So I think we cooperate pretty well with regions, but to be honest, exchange of knowledge and experience is something that always can be improved. And for example, in 2019, I worked a couple of months in the region of Amsterdam, and it gave me a lot of insight in the way they work together, and that's different from the way we work, and that helped us on several subjects to find each other much better.
Yeah. Okay, and well, to get more experience, like exchanging knowledge and so on. What do you hope or want or need from the audience here today? How can they help you?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Let me say collaboration is something that is not easy, but it's necessary to make impact on policy and on projects. And I strongly believe in the power of getting results from projects. That gives inspiration. So I hope that people have a nice experience of other projects that can inspire us, and that they will tell about it. That would be nice to hear about.
Well, that's a clear answer. So hopefully we get some response on that. Thank you, Han. Now we're going from a Dutch view to a Belgium view now. Marijke de Roek is joining us from the city of Antwerp. Is the view and the approach you just heard from Han, Laurens, and Tom very different from what's happening in Belgium or in Antwerp?
No, it's really not, because the challenges we are facing in Antwerp, they're very much like the challenges that are being faced by cities like Eindhoven, Breda, or Rotterdam or Amsterdam. The thing is, in Antwerp, we have at least 3 TEN-T corridors that come together. I know Rotterdam is the largest port in Europe, but Antwerp is, well, it's a strong competitor. And so we're facing a double problem. We've got a lot of freight that is entering the port, but is also leaving the port. And we have a poorly developed railroad system. I think it's a little bit different from the situation in Rotterdam, where you have a lot of waterways that connect the port to the hinterland. In Antwerp, we have just one waterway that is connecting a port of Antwerp to Germany. That's the canal, the Albert Canal. And then, of course, we have a lot of road traffic that is generated by the port. So our road system is really under a lot of pressure because of the logistics, the logistic impact of the port. But at the same time, Antwerp is an economic hub in Flanders. So we're attracting a lot of commuters. So congestion has been a hot topic since the end of the last millennium. So it's been on the agenda for quite a long time. And you can start doing a lot of things with regard to mobility from a local level, but you won't solve the problem, because the problem is supra local. So you really have to involve the port, you have to connect with other regions, but you also have to involve the broader, what we call functional area, the functional urban area, to really also tackle all the congestion that is caused by the commuters working in the port and in the city. So this is one of the reasons why, when we started with the program Smart Ways to Antwerp, we had this local focus, but I think it took us just 6 months to realize that we really had to broaden our scope. And so we went to talk to people working in Rotterdam, in Amsterdam, in Maastricht, and other regions in the Netherlands, and we learned quite a lot from them. So we introduced our own transport region, I think, in 2018 already. We set up a collaboration with more than 30 municipalities surrounding now the city. The port is also heavily involved, and of course, both the provinces of Antwerp and the provinces of what we call East Flanders are heavily involved. On top of that, we involved the regional level, the Flemish administration, and the national level, because in Belgium, the railroads are run by the national government. So let's say we introduced multi-level governance to tackle the mobility challenges that we're facing in the city. Something else that we learned in our especially in our area-oriented approach is that we don't look at mobility as a goal. We look at mobility as a means, and I think this is something also Laurens introduced. And the real goal is getting people to work, getting people to school, getting people to the hospitals or healthcare facilities, getting the goods to construction areas, getting the waste out of the city, and I think last but not least, getting our tourists or visitors to enjoy all the leisure that is offered by our cities, or even by the organizations in our more rural areas. So these are the main attractors of transport or travel or mobility. And so from a local perspective, you can really very well collaborate with them. This is something that can be done at a broader level. So this is one of the reasons why we believe that our area-oriented approach is really needed and is also going to work.
And you already mentioned plenty of parties that are involved. And how do you look at private parties? How should they be involved?
Oh, in Antwerp, we believe that they should be heavily involved because we have a very steep target set, which it's framed within our Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan. It's also now framed within our Sustainable Regional Mobility Plan, and it's part of our climate plan. So it's really part of the integral policy making that we've been doing in the city and in the region. And we've got this goal that says we want to achieve a modal split in the entire region of 50-50, let's say, sustainable versus non-sustainable trips. And this goal has to be reached by 2030. This is this very strong ambition because today we do achieve this in the urban area, but when we look at the peri-urban area, there we are still at a split of, let's say, 70 non-sustainable modal travels or transports or trips versus 30 sustainable percent. So we really have to catch up very strongly there. So, and that's one of the reasons I think why we're so why we're focusing on our stakeholders so much, because it's through these stakeholders that I've just mentioned, your employers, your schools, your hospitals, your leisure organizations, I shall call them. They are the ones that generate all these trips. So it's through them that we have to achieve our goals. And of course, if we really want to get people out of their cars, we have to offer them alternatives. And this was an exercise we made already at the beginning of this decade. It was very soon it became very obvious that it's not public transport that's going to solve all these this challenge. So you really need the private sector to come in, to come up with a sharing offer. So the offer of shared vehicles in Antwerp now is mainly set up by private companies, and they've been profitable so far in doing so. So the shared car offer or electric car offer is made by private companies, but also we're going to launch a shared electric bike system in the region. And again, it's a private company that's setting up this type of offer. So we really need the private sector to help and offer a number of sustainable mobility solutions. And of course, I'm forgetting an important partner that's on the data field. Again, it won't be the public entities, but it'll be a very strong collaboration between public players and, of course, private players that will make use in a very sensible way of all the data that are available. The best example I can give, or what we're trying to achieve, is, of course, if you want to set up mobility as a service offer, this is something that we're hoping that private companies will do. But in order to set this up, you of course have to make more and more mobility data available. And I think we, as a public body, we can work as a kind of what we call an intermediator, or somebody who really helps to connect different private companies in the way in setting up their business model, setting up their business case.
Great. And knowing what you know now, would you do things different in your approach, in your program, Slim naar Antwerpen, Smart Ways to Antwerp?
Yeah, the one thing that I would really change is involve the supranational and the national levels a bit earlier. Because we've been focusing on the local collaboration so heavily that we forgot that, of course, there are these higher levels, and if they don't evolve at the same pace, if they don't learn from the proof of concepts that we've been setting up, they might come up with legislation or a set of rules that you really think, oh no, this is really so not done, this is really not helping. And I think if we had involved them a bit earlier and got them to really know and learn share our experiences with them, they wouldn't be making the type of legislation that they are making right now. So because you really have to have a lot of space and room to experiment and to try innovative things. So you can only have true proofs of concept if you have, let's say, a kind of playground where you're allowed to try out and where you're also allowed to fail. But if you come up with a lot of rules at the front of a process, you kind of smother all innovation. And this is something that I'm very much afraid of that is going to happen the next couple of years, that we'll see national or regional governments coming in and setting up their own rules because they believe everything should be done in such a way. And so I'm very much afraid that the innovation will be smothered in that way.
Laurens and Han, do you also kind of feel that fear?
Well, I think it's one of the reasons that in Smart Ways we have a specific mobility lab for those kind of innovations, where we use a twinning concept, where we get innovation parties interested, using an approach where they can qualify themselves, but also linking them to, for instance, local problems, local areas, or larger players in the field. So getting grassroots innovation in there is something that you have to do specifically. Otherwise, it can get smothered in large initiatives. But we've been running the Mobility Lab for several years now, and it has led to a number of successful spin-offs.
Okay, great. Marijke, do you also believe that the sort of framework or approach you're doing with Slim naar Antwerpen is also applicable for other cities? Can you roll that same approach out in other regions and cities?
I think you easily can, because it all boils down to a kind of stakeholder approach. So if you know, if you can set up an organization where you can deal with all these stakeholders from different perspectives, so if you can really help all these stakeholders to connect, because this is really what we've been doing. We've been connecting mobility providers, whether they are public or whether they are private, with mobility generators. I'll just call them like that in a more generic way. I think this is something that every region or every city can easily do. Also making agreements or setting up agreements or kind of covenants around the sharing of data. Again, this is something that can happen everywhere, especially if we try to come up with standards. And I know that the colleagues in the Netherlands have been collaborating with the Oslo system as well. So we've set up a kind of common language to describe or to capture the data in the field of mobility. I think when we can let this grow or scale this up, I think this kind of type of collaboration this type of working can be set up everywhere. It's not that difficult to transfer what we've been doing, or I think to transfer what's going on either in Brabant or in Rotterdam.
Yeah. All right. That sounds promising. Thank you, Marijke, and also thank you, Laurens and Han, for sharing some insights and the challenges you're struggling with. looking at the audience and maybe also the speakers between each other, are there any questions you would like to raise? Remarks? But then it seems like everything was so clear. We can now... Eva, you have a question.
Yes, I have a question. My name is Eva Szabó. I'm Senior Policy Advisor at the Dutch Embassy in Hungary, Budapest. It was very interesting to hear all these experiences and all these great projects. But when you were talking about sharing data, Lawrence and also Marijke, is it not too sensitive, or how is this cooperation working? Because we are talking so much about privacy, data privacy. How do you look at this from this point of view to this problem?
Well, I think privacy is very important. And one of the benefits of working with transport and logistics is that there's a lot of data which doesn't have a privacy aspect in it. Of course, there is data, there is commercial sensitive data, and if companies share that, they want to be absolutely sure that no other companies are seeing that data. But a number of privacy concerns which have to do with natural persons can typically be filtered out. So we have a number of data exchanges, like a data dashboard, where you get an idea on how are goods transported in the south of the Netherlands, or what are typical traffic jams caused by containers, for instance. We see that kind of data can be shared. And we're using a mechanism called iShare, which is an international format to allow you as a company to give access to certain parts of your data. So you can say, for instance, I'm willing to share this part with the government, and I'm willing to share this part with competitors, but I'm not willing to share this part. And that is something there is a standard for, which we are now using, which allows you to keep those different sources at the right connection and still have enough data to do all kinds of data analytics, which are interesting in dashboards, for instance.
Okay, thank you. That's what I meant, actually, not private persons, but commercial privacy of, so companies don't want to share their data, especially transport companies with the competitors. So this is a solution for that, that you can filter out which information you give to them and which not.
Right.
Thank you for the answer.
Yeah, and Eva, what you also can do is, this is what we've been setting up in the city of Antwerp. You can have companies share services through APIs, and this is actually what is needed to set up a good, for instance, mobility as a service offer. So we ask, for instance, shared mobility providers to share all their data with us, but without the privacy data. So we don't want personal data. We want data about trips and the state of the vehicles, for instance. But this is not the kind of data that, for instance, a mass provider is interested in. They are interested in setting up ticketing services, and they want to connect at that level. So, and this is where we as a public body can really be a mediator. So, but of course, we're aware that there are commercial and often legal restrictions, but this is something we can also deal with. So this is something where a public body can easily help.
Thank you, Marijke, for your answer.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? No more hands raising. Well, then everything seems to be very clear. Well, I would like to thank Marijke, Tom, Laurens, and Hans for sharing some of your insights and thoughts on an area-oriented approach. Via the Smart Mobility Embassy, we hope to continue having these discussions and aim to work together with all of you to find solutions. I hope for all the participants it was a very fruitful webinar. You're always welcome to reach out with any questions, requests, or interest in further collaboration with us. And if you have any further personal questions for one of the speakers, you are able stick around for a couple more minutes. But to the rest of all the participants, thank you very much for joining today. Have a good evening, and for some maybe have a good day. I hope to stay in touch with all of you. Thank you.